You were never taught to think, you were taught to follow. You measure your days by notifications, your worth by algorithms, your focus by fragments. You chase clarity in a system designed to keep you numb. And somewhere along the way, you mistook busyness for direction, productivity for purpose, noise for knowledge. They don't need to chain you, they just need to keep you scrolling. Because if you ever paused long enough to hear your own mind, you'd realize how far you've drifted from who you were meant to become. This isn't fatigue, it's exile. Your mind is no longer home. And if you don't reclaim it soon, what will be left of you to return to? Every morning you wake up with a chance to move forward, to build, to climb one step closer to the life you say you want. But the moment your eyes open, the war begins. Your attention is under siege, and most of the time you don't even realize it. Notification, news, timelines, endless voices shouting for your mind, not to inform you, to fragment you, to keep you spinning, tired but not productive, moving but not advancing. And here's the tragedy. You call this normal. You don't see it for what it really is: warfare. Not the kind that takes your body, but the kind that robs your destiny one micro decision at a time. Distraction has become the most elegant form of self-destruction. It doesn't break you in half. It breaks you into pieces, little ones, over time, until your energy, your focus, your power is scattered across things that do not matter. You weren't born for that. You weren't born to live in a loop of stimulation. You weren't created to chase everything and accomplish nothing. You were built for something singular, something deep, something demanding your full capacity. But you've been trained away from it, trained to keep busy, trained to respond, trained to stay plugged in, always available, always consuming. And now, without realizing it, you've become a servant to noise. You scroll when you're anxious. You check when you're bored. You escape when you feel the pressure to become more than you are. But let me ask you something painful. How much of your life has been stolen by what seemed harmless? How many hours have disappeared into digital shadows? How many ideas have died before they were ever born? How much clarity have you traded for the next dopamine hit? And for what? A moment of stimulation, a few seconds of escape. But here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud, distraction is not neutral. It's not a break. It's a choice. And that choice comes with a price. That price is momentum. That price is depth. That price is destiny. Every time you run to the easy thing, you walk away from the essential thing. Not because you're weak, but because you've forgotten the cost of greatness. Distraction isn't just stealing your time. It's reshaping your identity. It's turning your powerful, sovereign mind into a reactive one, always responding, never leading. And what happens to a person who lives like that long enough? They forget how to hear themselves. They lose the signal of their inner knowing. They become so externally stimulated that silence feels like fear. And eventually, they stop moving forward altogether, not because they're stuck, but because they're scattered. Understand this. You cannot fulfill your potential in fragments. You cannot create extraordinary results in a state of internal chaos. Focus is not a luxury, it is a requirement. And distraction is the enemy of it all. So today, we begin with this premise. Your destiny is not defined by your potential. It is defined by your ability to protect your attention. If you lose that, you lose everything. Focus is not a skill. It is a decision. And for most people, it's the one decision they keep postponing. They think focus is something you wait to feel. That one day the noise will fade, the energy will rise, and everything will fall into place. But that day never comes because focus doesn't appear out of nowhere. It must be created, protected, and trained. Daily. Deliberately. Most people never master it because they never decide to. They live in reaction, responding to whatever demands their attention, mistaking urgency for important. They chase dozens of open tabs in their mind, checking tasks off a list that was never aligned with their calling. They move fast, but never deep. They do more, but accomplish less. They burn hours in motion, but never build anything that truly matters. And in the middle of all that motion is a quiet, painful truth. They are afraid of what focus will demand, because true focus isn't gentle. It's not comfortable. It's not safe. It requires that you cut away the unnecessary. that you say no repeatedly, ruthlessly, to anything that doesn't align with what you're here to do. It requires silence when you want noise, stillness when you want stimulation, and presence when your mind craves escape. That's why most people never choose it. Not because they can't, but because they won't. They would rather be busy than brutal. They would rather stay in the illusion of productivity than face the cost of mastery. Because here's the reality. Focus demands sacrifice. You cannot be everything to everyone. You cannot pursue 5 paths and expect to arrive anywhere with power. And yet, look around. The modern world is addicted to doing more, to chasing everything, to becoming more versatile, more available, more flexible, even if it costs them their identity. But power doesn't live in versatility. It lives in precision. And precision is born from elimination. You are not here to taste 1,000 flavors. You are here to develop the courage to say no, not just to the bad, but to the good. That's not great. To the appealing option that isn't aligned. To the opportunity that feels right, but isn't yours. That's the hardest part. Focus isn't hard because of distraction. It's hard because it exposes your indecision. It makes you confront the fact that you haven't truly chosen. You haven't declared your mission. You haven't defined what matters. So everything feels like it matters, and that's how you lose your power. But when you finally decide, truly decide that this is the path, this is the work, this is the one thing, something awakens. Suddenly, the noise gets quieter. The opinions lose their grip. The comparisons feel irrelevant because you're not scattered anymore. You're locked in. And that's when real clarity arrives. Not the kind you read in a book, the kind that comes from doing hard, focused, deliberate work for so long that your distractions begin to starve. That's when focus becomes your nature, not your effort. But you'll never reach that place unless you pass through the fire of elimination. Until you stop asking, what else can I do? And start asking, what must I cut? Because greatness isn't found in adding, it's found in subtracting. When you master that, you master your time, you master your energy, and eventually, you master your destiny. Imagine this. You hold a flashlight in your hand. Its beam spreads wide, gentle, general, soft. It touches everything, but penetrates nothing. Now picture a magnifying glass, held steady under the sun. Its power isn't in brightness, it's in concentration. It doesn't illuminate, it burns. That's the difference between scattered attention and focused intensity. Most people live like flashlights. They light up a little bit of everything. They dabble. They sample. They explore 5 ideas at once, pursue 3 goals in parallel, say yes to anything that feels good in the moment. And in doing so, they stay bright, but never make impact, because brilliance without focus is nothing more than a temporary glow. It impresses for a second, but it fades fast. Now think about the magnifying glass. That's focus. Not loud, not chaotic, but dangerous in the best way. It directs energy so precisely that it creates heat, fire, force. That's the level of attention that moves reality. That builds movements. That creates wealth, legacy, transformation. But it only works when held still. It only works when you stop shaking, stop switching, stop chasing novelty. You don't burn through steel by flickering the beam every 10 seconds. You don't change your life by touching 10 projects and completing none. You change your life by learning to hold the beam steady, firm, unshaken on what truly matters. And yet, most people don't. Because being the flashlight feels easier. It feels safer. It gets more applause. It keeps more options open. But options aren't power. You don't burn through steel by flickering the beam every 10 seconds. You don't change your life by touching 10 projects and completing none. You change your life by learning to hold the beam steady, firm, unshaken on what truly matters. And yet, most people don't, because being the flashlight feels easier. It feels safer. It gets more applause. It keeps more options open. But options aren't power. Execution is. Execution only happens when attention is sustained. And sustained attention is rare because it's uncomfortable. You'll be tempted to move, tempted to chase the next shiny thing, tempted to think, maybe I should do something else too, just in case this doesn't work. And that's how focus dies. Not in failure, but in fragmentation. You start a business but also sign up for a new course. You write a book but also take on 2 side hustles. You fix your diet but try 5 strategies at once. Then you wonder why progress feels slow, why nothing sticks, why your life feels full, but your soul feels scattered. It's because you've chosen to be the flashlight. You've chosen to light up the room instead of setting fire to a single thing that truly matters. And here's what you must understand. The world does not reward general energy. It rewards focused energy. That's why the oak tree digs roots before it grows upward. That's why the lion stalks one prey at a time. That's why a laser cuts while a lamp only glows. Nature already knows the truth. Force without focus is wasted. And that same truth applies to your time, your talent, your purpose. So stop trying to light up every direction. Choose your beam and hold it. Even when it's hard, even when it's boring, even when you're scared you chose wrong. Because the only way to know is to stay long enough to find out. The magnifying glass doesn't see fire immediately, but it believes in the principle, what I focus, I empower. What I scatter, I weaken. Your focus is not just a tool, it's a weapon. And it only works when you stop apologizing for aiming it at one thing. So stop being the flashlight. Start being the flame. The most dangerous enemy isn't the one who attacks you. It's the one who convinces you they don't exist. That's distraction today. It doesn't knock down your door. It seeps into your habits. It embeds itself into your daily rhythms until you start defending the very thing that's robbing you. You don't think you're distracted. You think you're busy. You think you're staying informed. You think you're being productive. But productivity isn't about motion, it's about direction. And distraction is the art of motion with no meaning. Look around. You wake up, and the first thing you check isn't your mind, it's your phone. You scroll through updates that change nothing about your purpose, but hijack everything about your mindset. And before you've even taken your first conscious breath, your focus has already been outsourced. This is not a glitch in the system. It is the system. Because the modern world runs on your inattention. Social platforms don't care what you think they care, how long they can keep you thinking about anything but yourself. Every app you use is designed not to serve you, but to seduce you. It's not a tool, it's a trap. And the worst part? You've made peace with it. You've accepted it as normal. You call it unwinding. You say, I just need a break. But distraction today isn't a break, it's a business. And your energy is the currency. Think about it. Would you let a stranger sit in your home every morning and whisper confusion into your ears? Would you allow them to tell you who you should envy, what you should fear, who you should be? Of course not. But that's exactly what happens when you open your device with no intention. You invite the noise in, and the noise becomes your default. The more fragmented your attention becomes, the easier you are to control. Not by force, but by overload. Not through silence, but through stimulation. If they keep your brain just busy enough, you'll never ask the deeper questions. Is this how I want to live? Is this thought even mine? What am I building, really? Most people will never ask those questions, because the questions only rise in silence, and silence has become unbearable. We fill it with music, with noise, with updates, with other people's opinions, because silence demands awareness, and awareness demands responsibility. Distraction removes both. It protects you from yourself until the day you realize you've built a life out of reactions instead of decisions. You say you want to focus, but do you even remember what it feels like? To hold one thought, to pursue one goal, to dive deep into one thing without a dozen notifications begging for your mind? Focus isn't hard because we're incapable. It's hard because we're untrained. We have been conditioned day by day, click by click, to give away our attention for free, to entertain the trivial, to celebrate the shallow, to confuse information with wisdom. But there is no wisdom in endless updates. There is no purpose in passive consumption. There is no destiny in distraction. And so the war continues quiet, not with violence, but with clever design, with infinite scrolls, with autoplay, with fear of missing out. And unless you fight back, unless you reclaim your attention with discipline and intention, you will spend your entire life reacting and never truly living. Because the enemy is not out there. The enemy is in your pocket, in your patterns, in the quiet addiction to everything that doesn't matter. And the first step in winning the war is realizing it's being fought. The world will offer you 1,000 paths, each one wrapped in possibility, each one whispering, you could be this, you could have that. And if you're not careful, you'll try to walk them all. A little of this, A little of that, never fully choosing, always wondering if you're missing something. But here's the truth most people run from. You can't be everything. You're not supposed to be. You're supposed to choose. Not out of limitation, but out of conviction. Because power doesn't come from having options. It comes from commitment. And commitment demands something we rarely talk about. Sacrifice. Not the dramatic movie scene kind, but the quiet, daily kind. The saying no, the letting go. The refusal to chase what isn't aligned, even if it's good, even if it looks impressive, even if everyone else is doing it. Focus is a filter. It cuts, it eliminates. It says, this is what I'm doing. Everything else can wait. And that takes courage. Because when you choose one thing, you have to mourn all the things you're not choosing. You have to grieve the versions of yourself that could have been, the paths you'll never take, the talents you'll never develop, the applause you'll never receive. You'll have to face the fear that says, but what if I pick the wrong thing? And you will. You will pick wrong sometimes. You'll invest in something that doesn't work. You'll chase a dream that changes form. You'll commit to something that eventually needs to be let go. But none of that is worse than the slow death of trying to do it all. Because when you try to chase everything, you become nothing. A diluted version of yourself, always in motion, never in purpose. Look at the people who built empires. They didn't just choose, they sacrificed. Steve Jobs didn't dabble. He said no to 1,000 things. Warren Buffett called focus saying no to almost everything. They understood what most people don't. Success isn't about doing more. It's about choosing less and going all in. But here's what makes that so hard in today's world. We are praised for being busy, for juggling multiple things, for saying yes to every opportunity, for being endlessly available, versatile, adaptable. But availability is not value. Versatility is not purpose. You can be good at many things, but if you're not great at the one thing that actually matters, you'll never create impact. You'll just stay in motion, always reaching, never arriving. So let me ask you something confronting. What are you willing to give up to go all in? Are you willing to disappoint others? Are you willing to be misunderstood? Are you willing to be boring, invisible, irrelevant to the noise while you build something that actually matters? Because that's the price of real focus. You won't be everywhere. You won't be doing everything. You won't be constantly stimulated, but you'll be aligned. You'll be locked in. And that's where mastery lives. In stillness, in repetition, in discipline, in the quiet, daily choice to pursue depth over distraction. So choose one thing, one dream, one mission that lights your soul on fire, and protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. The people who change the world aren't those who try everything. They're the ones who choose, and then sacrifice everything that doesn't fit inside that choice. Focus isn't just a mental exercise. It's a spiritual act, because the moment you decide to focus, truly focus, you are no longer chasing goals. You are declaring who you are. Focus is identity. It is purpose made visible. It is the act of saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm building, this is what I will no longer tolerate. That's why it's so difficult. Not because the world is too noisy, but because silence forces confrontation, and confrontation reveals contradiction. You say you want clarity, but do your habits reflect that? You say you want purpose, but does your attention support it? You say you want to change your life, but does your daily behavior confirm that decision? Focus doesn't begin with a planner. It begins with a reckoning, because focus isn't about effort. It's about alignment. It's what happens when your mind, your body, and your spirit stop pulling in different directions. When you stop waking up with one intention and living by another. When you stop dreaming of change, but walking in circles. That misalignment is what causes most of your exhaustion, not the work itself, but the inner conflict of knowing you're meant for more while living in less, of wanting depth but settling for distraction, of craving transformation but tolerating comfort. And comfort is the slow death of destiny. You were not born to blend in. You were not created to remain scattered. You were designed to channel your life force completely, deliberately, and without apology. But to do that, you must first ask the questions no one wants to ask. Who am I becoming when I'm distracted? Who am I betraying when I avoid what matters? And what would change if my actions finally aligned with my essence? The answers won't come from a book. They will come from silence. From paying attention to what drains you and what restores you. From noticing what you reach for when no one's watching. From admitting that much of your productivity has been performance, not progress. True focus doesn't begin in your calendar. It begins in your soul. When your decisions align with your values. When your boundaries reflect your mission. When your no is just as sacred as your yes. That's the spiritual dimension of focus. It's not about doing less for the sake of minimalism. It's about creating space for what's eternal to emerge. And that only happens when you clear out what's in the way. The clutter, the comparisons, the silent agreements you've made with mediocrity just to feel safe. You were made for something specific. Not perfect, not flashy, but specific. And every time you say yes to things that don't match your identity, you fracture your alignment. Every time you chase someone else's timeline, someone else's dream, someone else's version of success, you drift until one day you don't recognize your own reflection. Not because you failed, but because you fragmented. That's why focus matters. Not because it makes you productive, but because it keeps you whole. So take this seriously. Focus is not a tactic. It's a spiritual contract. It's the moment you decide to stop betraying yourself in small, subtle ways and start honoring what was placed inside you since the beginning. You don't need more apps. You don't need another trick or tool. You need alignment. You need the courage to live a life that matches the truth you've been avoiding. You need to remember who you were before the world scattered your attention. Because the moment you remember that, everything changes. Because the moment you remember that, everything changes. Focus isn't just about hitting goals. It's about healing your life. Because when you focus, truly focus, you don't just get more done. You get aligned, and alignment creates clarity. Clarity creates momentum, and momentum transforms everything it touches. Start with your health. You already know what to do. Eat well, move daily, sleep enough. But knowledge without focus is noise. You fail not because you don't have information, but because your attention is divided. You try 5 plans at once. You bounce from diet to diet. You treat your body like an afterthought until it screams. But when you focus, when you commit to a few simple disciplines and eliminate the rest, your body begins to respond, not because it's being punished, but because it's finally being prioritized. Focus is the cure to inconsistency. Now look at your work. You spend your days in meetings, messages, and a never-ending loop of shallow tasks. And still, nothing deep gets done. You say you're working hard, but effort without focus is just exhaustion. You're burned out not from work, but from wasted attention. Because true work requires immersion. The kind of deep focus where time disappears and only creation remains. That's where brilliance is born. Not in multitasking, but in mastery. You don't need longer hours. You need fewer interruptions, fewer tasks, fewer priorities that aren't priorities at all. Focus isn't more effort, it's less noise. Now think about your relationship. Presence is the currency of connection, and distraction is the silent killer of intimacy. How many times have you been in a room, physically there, but mentally gone? How often do you listen just long enough to respond, not to understand? When your attention is divided, the people around you feel it. They feel your absence, even in your presence. And over time, they stop reaching for the connection that keeps going unanswered. But when you bring focus into your relationships, everything changes. Suddenly, your conversations deepen. Your love strengthens. Your ability to see others really see them returns. Because presence is the purest form of love, and focus is how it's delivered. Finally, look at your peace. You say you want calm, but your life is filled with mental tabs you never close. Decisions unmade, projects half-finished, commitments half-hearted. That's why you can't sleep. Not because you're too busy, but because your energy is scattered in 1,000 directions that don't serve you. When you focus, you reclaim your power. You reclaim your rhythm. You stop leaking energy into things that no longer matter. You simplify. You let go. You quiet the noise, and with it, the anxiety that noise creates. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of clarity, and clarity is what focus gives you. You see, we've been sold a lie. That focus is about achievement, that it's a tool for high performers and elite professionals. But it's more than that. Focus is a life strategy. It's how you build what matters. It's how you become whole again. It's how you protect the things you say are most important: your health, your relationships, your purpose, your mind. Because everything meaningful requires your full presence. And presence only comes when you stop letting your attention be stolen. Focus isn't a work tactic. It's a spiritual, emotional, and relational discipline. And when you make it your way of life, not just a productivity hack, you'll find that everything you once struggled to fix starts to fix itself, because attention is energy. And where your energy goes, your life grows. Distraction never shows you the invoice. It never tells you what it's costing you, not in the moment. It arrives quietly, as a scroll, a tap, a quick break, and it leaves just as quietly, taking your time, your clarity, your momentum with it. That's the danger. It's not the obvious thief, it's the subtle one. The one that takes just enough each day that you don't notice what you're losing. But over time, you look up and something is missing. The book you were going to write, still unwritten. The business you were going to start, still a concept. The body you said you'd rebuild, still a someday. The clarity you've been chasing for years, still buried under noise. And the truth hits you. Later is a lie. Later is the graveyard where dreams go to die quietly. Later is how the world keeps you obedient, always planning, never building. You weren't meant for later, you were meant for now. And that means making a choice. Not just to work harder, but to protect your attention like your future depends on it, because it does. Because if you lose your focus, you don't just lose time, you lose yourself. You weren't born distracted, you were trained into it. Every swipe, every tab, every unfinished thought, each one reshaped the wiring of your mind until noise felt normal and stillness felt like anxiety. But here's the good news. If distraction is trained, so is focus. Your mind is not fixed, it is programmable. And right now, whether you realize it or not, it's running on scripts you didn't write. Scripts that say, check your phone every 5 minutes. Don't sit too long with one task, it's boring. Open that new tab just in case you're missing something. These aren't conscious choices. They're patterns, conditioned behaviors, mental defaults that now run your day. And if you don't retrain them, they will run your life. Because the mind is like a muscle. And right now, yours has been trained to twitch, not to stay. It jumps. It scrolls. It avoids deep thinking like it avoids pain. But deep focus is painful at first because it confronts you with what you've been avoiding. That's why training the mind begins with discomfort. The discomfort of sitting in silence, of doing one thing for longer than feels natural, of not checking, not switching, not escaping. This is mental discipline, and it's not glamorous. No one applauds you for turning your phone off. No one celebrates you for focusing on one project for 4 hours. There's no trophy for ignoring the dopamine hit of distraction, but there is transformation. Because every time you resist the impulse to escape, you're not just practicing willpower, you're rewiring your identity. You're becoming someone who can stay. Stay with the task. Stay with the discomfort. Stay with your purpose even when it's hard. That's the real win. Discipline isn't about forcing yourself to suffer. It's about teaching your mind to obey your vision, not your emotions. To follow your direction, not your distractions. And it starts small. 1 hour of deep work without a single notification. One conversation where your phone stays face down, forgotten, and you don't realize what's slipping away. Because life doesn't scream when you stop paying attention. It just gets quieter. The laughter doesn't feel as deep. The winds don't hit as hard. The people closest to you start to feel further away. And one day, you wake up in a life that looks fine on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. That's the price of a distracted life. You don't just lose time. You lose presence, and presence is everything. It's how you connect. It's how you love. It's how you heal. It's how you build anything worth remembering. So how do you get it back? Not by downloading another productivity app. Not by scheduling another task. But by coming back again and again to what's in front of you. When you eat, eat. When you speak, slow down. When you sit with someone you love, let your phone die. Let the world wait. Because the truth is, the world will always be louder than your life. It will always ask for more. More attention. More reaction. More of you. But presence, to be here, fully. Not half present. Not one eye on the clock. But rooted. Because everything beautiful lives in presence. The memory you didn't know you were making. The breakthrough that happens mid-sentence. The peace that sneaks in when the screen turns off. Presence isn't found in some perfect environment. It's found in you when you stop rushing, when you stop performing, when you stop living through a lens that isn't your own. It asks for less. It asks for quiet. It asks for noticing. And most of all, it asks for intention. And most of all, it asks for intention. To be here, fully, not half present, not one eye on the clock, but rooted, because everything beautiful lives in presence. The memory you didn't know you were making. The breakthrough that happens mid-sentence. The peace that sneaks in when the screen turns off. Presence isn't found in some perfect environment. It's found in you when you stop rushing, when you stop performing, when you stop living through a lens that isn't your own. And presence is where the magic happens. This is where your creativity lives, where your intuition whispers, where your courage awakens, where your real life, not the one you're curating, but the one you're actually feeling, begins to return. You were never meant to live distracted. You were meant to notice, to taste, to feel, to experience life in full resolution, to look people in the eye and not flinch, to walk slowly, sometimes not because you're lazy, but because you can. When you reclaim your focus, you don't just become more productive, you become more human. Because the most radical act in today's world isn't hustle, it's present. To live fully here, in this moment, unafraid to miss what doesn't matter, because you're too in love with what does. There comes a moment in every life when hesitation becomes betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. That moment when you keep one foot in and one foot out. When you say you're committed, but keep the exit door cracked open just in case. That's not strategy. That's fear wearing the mask of logic. And fear loves to whisper, don't go all in. What if it doesn't work? What if you fail? What if they laugh? So you hedge. You split your focus. You try one thing but keep 3 backup plans in place, just in case. But here's the problem. When you give yourself an out, you never give your all. And anything less than all in the pursuit of something that truly matters is a quiet form of self-sabotage. That's why some people never break through. Not because they lacked skill, talent, or opportunity, but because they kept too many doors open. They were trying but never deciding. Interested but never invested. Curious but never convicted. But history doesn't remember the curious. It remembers the committed, the ones who burned their ships, like Hernan Cortez, who ordered his men to destroy their boats after landing in enemy territory. Not because he wanted to punish them, but because he knew, as long as you can go back, you'll never fully move forward. You may not be standing on a beach with flames behind you, but the question is the same. What in your life are you still keeping just in case? That backup job, that relationship you've outgrown, that habit you say you'll quit eventually, that second dream that's safer, easier, more accepted. What are you still holding on to that's keeping you from going all in? Because distraction doesn't always look like scrolling. Sometimes it looks like undecided living. It's the invisible weight you carry when you won't close the doors you no longer belong in. And every open door splits your energy. Every backup plan weakens your belief. Every maybe blocks your momentum. You can't build an extraordinary life with half of your focus and a quarter of your heart. I will move forward. I will finish this. I will not leave myself the luxury of retreat. I've wasted enough time already. Will it be scary? Yes. But you were scared when you stayed stuck too. Will you lose people? Maybe. But you were losing yourself in distraction. Will it take everything? Yes. But that's what destiny requires, not comfort, not safety, but everything. The truth is, your focus has been fragile because your commitment has been conditional. You've always left the door open for something easier. But the fire you're looking for? It comes when you remove the option to turn back. So what needs to burn? What bridge do you need to stop crossing back over? What version of you do you need to bury so the real one can rise? Because until you burn the ships, you'll never know what you're truly capable of. You can't hit a target you can't see. And yet every day, people walk through life aiming at nothing. They say they want success, but can't define what that actually means. They say they want freedom, but haven't identified what they need to be free from. They chase more money, more peace, more progress, but haven't decided where enough actually begins. And then they wonder why everything feels foggy. But that fog isn't fate, it's a lack of clarity. And clarity is not optional, it's foundational. Clarity is your compass. Without it, every opportunity feels like an obligation. Every distraction feels like a detour. Every maybe starts sounding like a yes. You don't lack motivation. You lack a destination. And when you're vague about your destination, your life defaults to drift. You say yes to jobs you don't care about. You date people who don't match your vision. You waste time solving problems that aren't even yours. And eventually, your days get filled, but your life feels empty. Why? Because purpose requires precision. You don't need 10 goals. You need one that's clear. You don't need a 10-year plan. You need to know what matters right now. Because without clarity, distraction wins by default. The world will always give you something to do, some fire to put out, some urgent thing to respond to. But clarity is how you decide what actually deserves your energy. Clarity is ruthless. It's not soft or sentimental. It doesn't care if something is popular, profitable, or perfectly timed. It asks one thing: does this move you closer to what you were born to build? If the answer is no, the answer is no. No matter how shiny the opportunity, no matter how loud the pressure, no matter how tempting the shortcut. Because every yes that's not aligned with your vision is a no to the life you could have had. That's the hidden cost of vague living. You think you're keeping your options open, but what you're actually doing is delaying your destiny in the name of indecision. Look at history. The people who changed the world weren't generalists. They had specific visions, dreams they could articulate in vivid detail, destinies they defined before the world believed in them. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't say, "I have a general idea." He said, "I have a dream." And he painted it with such clarity that millions saw it with him. That's the power of defined vision. It magnetizes your actions. It repels distractions. It guides your energy like a compass, cutting through chaos with conviction. So ask yourself, what are you really building? Not what sounds impressive, not what others expect, not what feels safe. What ignites something deep in you? What outcome would break your heart if you never saw it come to life? Name it, write it, say it out loud. Define it so clearly that anything not aligned with it becomes obvious noise. Because if you don't get clear, you will get distracted. It's not a possibility, it's a guarantee. Distraction is the destiny of the vague. But clarity is power. It's the quiet strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are, what you want, and what you're no longer available for. And once you have that clarity, your yes becomes stronger, your no becomes easier, and your life becomes yours again. Clarity is the beginning, but it's not the breakthrough. You can know exactly what you want and still get nowhere. You can write it on your wall, say it out loud, visualize it every morning, and yet you'll remain stuck if you never move. Because clarity without execution is just a well-lit prison. Too many people stop at insight. They collect quotes, they read books, they listen to podcasts, nod along, feel inspired, and then go right back to the same distractions, the same loops, the same delays masked as planning. But nothing changes until you act, until you close the gap between what you know and what you do. This is where most people lose. But action is different. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. It's quiet. It requires you to confront the resistance most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Not at the level of awareness, but at the level of discipline. Because awareness feels good. It gives you a hit of hope, a sense of momentum, even if you haven't moved an inch. Calendars with blocked sacred time. Spaces designed for clarity, not clutter. Devices configured to reduce noise, not increase it. Routines that don't ask, "What should I do today?" but instead say, "This is what matters." And the beauty of it all? When your systems are strong, your mind can be soft. You don't have to fight every hour for control. You just follow the rhythm you designed. Because freedom doesn't come from spontaneity. It comes from structure. Not rigid, lifeless routines, but aligned, intentional rhythms that protect the work, the clarity, and the peace you've worked so hard to build. So guard your gates. Audit what gets your attention. Protect your calendar like it's your purpose, because it is. Design your space to reflect the life you're building, not the one you're escaping. Because at the end of the day, your systems will always win. If you don't create them with intention, they'll be created for you by default. And those defaults rarely serve your destiny. You live in an age where distraction is rewarded and focus is rebellion, where speed is worshipped and depth is forgotten, where you're praised for being available, visible, connected, even when you're falling apart inside. But there's a war happening beneath all of it, not on your screen, not in your schedule, but in your soul. It's the war between the version of you that knows what really matters and the version that keeps pretending it can wait. The final war is not between you and the world. It's between you and your willingness to remain scattered, because that's what distraction thrives on: your permission, not your failure, not your weakness, your quiet agreement to keep living half there, half aware, half alive. But you're not here for that. You feel it in your frustration, in your restlessness, in that quiet voice at 2 a.m. that keeps asking, what if I actually tried? What if I finally focused? What if I stopped apologizing for wanting more? And you know the answer, even if it scares you, because the moment you choose focus, everything changes. Not just your output, not just your productivity, but your identity. You stop playing small. You stop numbing your potential. You stop chasing what looks good and start building what is good. You become dangerous, not to others, but to every lie that ever told you you weren't ready, you weren't enough, or you had time to waste. Because the moment you go all in, truly all in, the world has no choice but to respond. Opportunities open, people notice, and more importantly, you finally start to believe yourself again. That's the real victory. Not the external wins, but the internal shift. The return of trust, the restoration of self-respect, the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't just dream, but decides. That kind of focus isn't loud. It's still, like a mountain, like a warrior who no longer fights unnecessary battles, like a soul that knows where it's going and refuses to be pulled away again. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming anchored, rooted in what matters, grounded in what lasts, and committed to the path you know is yours, even when it's hard, even when it's slow, even when it's lonely. Because clarity costs comfort, focus costs approval, discipline costs convenience. But what you gain is freedom. Not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to become everything you were built to be. And in a world that constantly tries to fracture you, to keep you overstimulated, overcommitted, and underaligned, that choice to focus is nothing less than revolutionary. So this is your line in the sand. This is your moment. You can keep explaining your potential, or you can finally express it. You can keep dancing with distraction, or you can divorce it. You can keep pretending there's more time, or you can realize that today is the time, because your destiny isn't waiting forever. And the longer you delay your focus, the longer you delay the version of you that builds, that heals, that creates, that transforms. That version requires clarity. It requires commitment. It requires focus. Distraction is still calling, but so is your destiny. Only one gets to win.